John Pollock here with you. We're getting set for UFC 205 on Saturday night from Madison Square Garden, New York City. No better person to have on than MMAfighting.com's own Ariel Helwani. And Ariel, we went through the process in Ontario where the criminal code had to be changed, and it seemed like MMA was never going to come to Ontario. And then UFC 129, a gigantic event. Is there a similar sentiment that you sense here in New York City, where it's just been such a pent-up demand? And I think a lot of people had given up that the UFC was ever going to be able to come back to New York.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that it kind of reminds me in a weird way of like the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight. It went through all these ups and downs, and I think at some point we all kind of gave up. I remember even Dana White saying, "I'm done talking about New York. You know, if it never happens, I don't care." And then, of course, Sheldon Silver gets in trouble last January, not this past January, the one before. And now we're starting to feel a little more confident. And it was a little too soon for 2015. But I think once 2016 came, everyone was really confident that it would happen in due time. And everyone at Zuffa was confident as well. And just being here, you know, it hasn't quite hit me just yet, because every time they do events in New Jersey, they've come here. Like, we've done media days in this very room at the theater. We've gone to press conferences. I think only Saturday night it will hit me that we're actually sitting inside the world's most famous arena watching UFC action. So it hasn't quite hit me in the heart just yet, if you get what I'm saying.
There have been so many blockbuster cards this year that when all is said and done, I think we all expect 205 to do a gigantic number, maybe the biggest ever. I think it could. And it's kind of perplexing when you think that Conor McGregor, with Nate Diaz and now with Eddie Alvarez, he's going to top UFC 200 on 3 separate occasions this year alone. Does this feel like everything that, I think the anticipation for 200 was at such a fever pitch, but this is the card that feels like what they wanted out of 200.
100%. I mean, to be honest, 202 felt bigger than 200 to me. 200 to me, when we look back at the history of the sport, will be viewed as like one of the great shams in UFC history. From you know, what happened with Conor, taking him off the card for a ridiculous reason, the deal with Brock Lesnar, waiving his, you know, his USADA, that USADA exemption, and not making him, you know, do the proper testing. To the sale being announced 2 days after, you know, those people who worked so hard that week, and 2 days later they're being told, you know, we're being sold and a lot of you are losing your jobs. To the John Jones situation. I mean, when I think back to 200, I do not have fond memories of it. When I think back to 202, what a smashing success. When I think back to this event thus far, only one casualty as far as the officially announced card. I know, obviously, Ali Quinta was supposed to be on, John Vellante was supposed to be on, but since it has been announced, we suffered the loss of the Rashad Evans-Tim Kennedy fight. But this feels like the stack card that we were promised. And credit to Lorenzo Fertitta, I know he had nothing to do with this card, but when they first started telling us they wanted to come here, he always said a UFC 100 type card would come here. This is better than UFC 100 in my opinion, so they certainly lived up to their word in that regard.
Certainly you always try to stay unbiased, but this week on your show you played a clip of an interview with Eddie Alvarez from January of 2013, and I remember that period so well, where it just felt this guy completely got screwed by this judge's interpretation of what a Bellator match was. He was going to be on that card with George St. Pierre and Nick Diaz and make life-changing money, and was denied it. And I can't help but look at this card that, you know, not one that really believes in fate, but you kind of have to look at it like what a great story this is for Eddie Alvarez, where he, win or lose, he is going to make an enormous amount of money on Saturday night. And I think that's something that it's, if you were following that entire Bellator saga, it's got a nice ending to it.
Sure, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I think there was a time where we all thought he might never get here. He might be the guy who fought in Bodog, in Elite XC, in Bellator, and never the UFC. Kind of like that Sting-like character before Sting made it to WrestleMania, but we all know that was
Perfect analogy.
Is there a better one? There's got to be a better one, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? And I have to say, I gained a whole newfound appreciation for Eddie Alvarez after visiting where he grew up. I had the privilege of going to Kensington, Philadelphia, North Philadelphia in August as he was trying to sort of campaign for this fight, and we walked around his hometown, and I've never been to a neighborhood like this. I mean, I have been very lucky growing up. There were syringes on the ground. There were people passed out. He would not do the interview in his hometown without 2 armed police officers following us at all times. To see where he came from, to hear him talk about this board that he put up with his family of all the things that they want in life. His kids picked, you know, their favorite toys. His wife put a new kitchen that he wanted. He put up $1 million fight. He's going to make more than $1 million on Saturday when all's said and done. That's amazing. He is literally living out his dream. And yes, Conor has a big a big part of that. He is a big part of that. He's making this happen for him. But Eddie Alvarez is a champion, and in life, it's the right place at the right time. And you kind of feel for Rafael dos Anjos, who was in this position not that long ago. He's the big loser of 2016. He literally lost this lottery ticket, and now Eddie's cashing in, and it really couldn't happen to a more deserving guy.
I feel this card also comes at a time when there's so much uncertainty with the future of this promotion and all of the changing faces. We don't know what this company will look like a year from now, what the output of shows is, what the number of pay-per-views are. There's so many questions, their international expansion, that this is at least an event that I think you look at, what an incredible card, and it's a positive outlook, where it's been chaos. I mean, the cuts were a really depressing story for a lot of people that you've gotten to know and that were instrumental in getting them to this place in New York. And I think that this card, it's a positive note. Over a couple of months that has been rocky, to say the least.
Well, you talk about UFC 129. I mean, Tom Wright was incredibly instrumental in getting the sport legalized in the province of Ontario. Now he's no longer with the company. I will say this, though, if it's never going to be 100% positive. If I could pick out one sort of dark cloud hanging over the event, there's one New York-born fighter on this card, and I think we all kind of thought that those Serra-Longo guys would be representing. I don't think anyone would have had a problem with this card sort of being New York versus the world. And things didn't work out for various reasons. John Vellante got hurt. Ali Quinta had his issues. I still don't understand why Aljamain Sterling isn't on the card, but I digress. And, of course, Rashad Evans was born in Niagara Falls, and he's no longer on the card. That was not their doing. So it's Chris Weidman. And in a weird way, it's somewhat fitting because he was the face of MMA in New York. He was the guy who, went to Albany to lobby. He was the champion. He's the guy who beat Anderson Silva. And he did a lot to get this sport legalized here, in my opinion. He did a lot of work that he was not compensated for. So that's a nice story in its own right. But, yeah, the card is relatively intact. It's the main event that we all wanted. It's the star and Conor McGregor that we all wanted. And it's two other great title fights as well. So there's really nothing to complain about.
Last question. I want to bring up, there's so many different stories and fighters on this card that you can go in directions of. Looking at Miesha Tate, here's somebody that was part of 196 with Conor. They were supposed to be on 200 together and now on 205 again. And, the success of this card, a lot of it is going to go to the main event. But I feel that Miesha Tate has certainly developed her own audience that she has brought, and it's been proven numerous times. I mean, putting them in that main event slot on just a couple of days' notice. She's an interesting fighter of where she goes after this fight, presuming a win and where everything shakes out at the women's bantamweight division. But that is someone that I feel is just kind of hidden on that main card. There's
a lot of, honestly, I think the Weidman-Romero fight is hidden. Khabib Nurmagomedov is stuck on the prelims. That's an incredibly important fight for him, especially coming off of what Tony Ferguson did last week. But yeah, Miesha Tate is top 8 biggest draws in the UFC. If you just go by her social media, she's got millions of followers on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook combined. She's by far one of the most popular fighters. This is an interesting fight because she coached Raquel Pennington on The Ultimate Fighter that season, opposite of Ronda Rousey. And I'm always curious how someone responds, especially a now former champion, from a knockout. The biggest trait that she had going for her, in my opinion, as a fighter was I always thought that she was unbreakable. She was defeatable, but it was hard to break Miesha Tate, and Amanda Nunes broke her. Finished her rather quickly. A lot happened leading up to that fight. She almost missed weight. So there's a lot of questions that she needs to answer in this fight. I think it's a good, the UFC throws people into the fire time after time after time. I'm not saying Raquel Pennington isn't a top contender, but I think this is a nice kind of fight for her to get back on her feet. And if Raquel wins, now you have a new contender. So it's sort of a win-win in that regard.
He is Ariel Helwani. You can catch him at MMAfighting.com along with his great team. Also the co-host of the MMA Hour with New York Rick.
What? Blasphemy.
And likely or unlikely, you will be coming back for your annual stop for the New Year's show.
By the way, you didn't address whether or not I said likely or unlikely, and I think I said likely last year. I think you're not giving me the credit that I deserve.
Okay, well, the great thing is it's all documented.
Well, I would have expected a pro like you to actually look at the archives and see what I said instead of slandering me and saying that I was not letting him live out his dream, because I'm the one who gave this to him. No one even knows what we're talking about at this point.
They all know.
We've lost everyone, but here's what you need to know. We're here at the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, the home of the 2017 New York Knickerbockers. It is going down later on tonight. I don't know if this is airing on Wednesday, is it?
It's airing now.
It's live. Knicks versus Nets. Wednesday night. Check out Fight News Now Extra. Check out the weigh-in. Check out Fight Network, baby.
Ariel Helwani. He's got a jet.